In the movie Fried Green Tomatoes, there's a scene where Evelyn Couch is talking to her husband Ed about allowing Miss Threadgood to come into their home and live. Now, as you may recall, Evelyn Couch has gone to this nursing home with her husband to visit her husband's aunt, who doesn't want anything to do with her, so she ends up in the lobby there at the nursing home, where Miss Threadgood is there, and they start visiting, and Miss Threadgood tells her all about the story of the Whistle Stop Cafe and the murder of Frank Bennett, and about Big George, and about Ruth Jameson, and about Itchy Threadgood. And then Miss Threadgood in these conversations helps Evelyn begin to peel away the expectations that have been placed on her from when she was first a child, and helps Evelyn to stop trying to fit herself into these predetermined, prefabricated roles and begin to learn how to create roles that fit her. As Evelyn explains how Miss Threadgood has changed her life, her husband Ed says, "What's changed?" Evelyn says, "The air and the light." And there's a short pause, and the conversation moves on quickly without really giving significance to those words. What has changed? The air and the light. The air, every breath I take. And the light, everything I see. On the 2nd day of July in 2006, I walked into the doors of this church for the very first time. And I met Benedette. And all that changed for me was the air and the light. And I knew for the first time in my life that it was possible for me to transition. A week later, I sat in a pew here in this church, and I listened to Pastor Paul Evans do a sermon on 2 Corinthians 5:17. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, they are a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. And all that changed for me was the air and the light. And I knew for the first time in my life that God wanted me to be the woman of my soul, and that through Jesus, I would find everything I needed to be able to accomplish that. I came back to this church 2 weeks later and introduced Stephanie to the world, to the light of God, and to you. Jill, who invited me to this church, took me to a thrift store the day before and bought me a dress and a pair of shoes and a purse and just the right earrings. And I stuck them behind the seat of my pickup truck because I was living in a men's halfway house at the time. Couldn't exactly get dressed at the halfway house and drive to the church. So I drove and I parked out in the parking lot, and I sat there and I argued with myself for about 10 or 15 minutes about, is it okay for me to come in and do this? I knew I was going to be accepted. I'd already seen that. I knew that you all would greet me with love. I still wasn't convinced. I still wasn't completely convinced that this was what God wanted me to do. And I still didn't recognize that Jesus was walking beside me. Still, I did recognize that this was the only chance I would ever have to be able to present myself as who I truly am. And I did it. I went down to the basement, and I changed clothes in the women's bathroom. Brandy, who some of you know, comes here sometimes, she guarded the door so that none of you biological women might actually walk into a bathroom and see what looked like a man in a dress, which, of course, I didn't realize that wouldn't have bothered you at all. It's true, but I didn't know. And then I came up in the parlor, and you all greeted me with love. You know, the kind of love, like, I have it, you look like you could use some, here it is. The kind of love that God shares with us. I sat down in the pew right there where my friend Tony is sitting, and I looked up at the cross. And for the first time in my life, I felt truth and self in the eyes of the Lord. And the attendance book came around, and I signed my name Stephanie Mott for the very first time. And I apologize to Pastor Paul, but I haven't got a clue what the sermon was about. I was being Stephanie in front of God and everybody, and it was amazing. It was incredibly amazing. But I do remember the communion. Reverend Janice was my communion server that day. And after she served my communion, she put her arms on my shoulders and she said, God bless your daughter for the faith she has shown in you. and Stephanie was born. And all that changed for me was the air and the light. Every breath I will ever take, everything I will ever see.